The gunshot echoed across the valley as Bethany Turner clutched her swollen belly, praying the noise wouldn't startle her baby into an early arrival. It was 1876 in the unforgiving territory of Montana, and at 22, she found herself utterly alone, hiding in an abandoned trapper's cabin as snow began to dust the pine trees outside. The father of her child, a sweet-talking gambler passing through town, had disappeared months ago with her savings and her dignity, leaving nothing but empty promises and a growing child in her womb. "Not yet, little one," she whispered, rubbing circles over her stomach. "Just a few more days." But the baby had other plans. The pain struck like lightning at midnight, forcing a gasp from Bethany's lips. She had been preparing for weeks, boiling water, collecting clean linens, reading the midwifery book she'd stolen from the doctor's office before fleeing town. The townsfolk had been cruel in their judgment, and the banker's wife had made it clear that a woman in Bethany's condition would not be welcome in respectable society. Hours passed in a blur of sweat and tears as Bethany labored alone. When dawn broke over the mountains, painting the cabin in soft golden light, a tiny cry joined the morning birdsong. A daughter perfect and pink with a dusting of dark hair. "Hello, my sweet Emma," Bethany whispered, cradling the infant to her chest. "It's just you and me now." For 3 days, Bethany recovered in the tiny cabin, gathering strength and planning her next move. The meager supplies she'd managed to bring would last another week at most. Then she would need to find work, somehow, somewhere that wouldn't ask questions about a young woman with a newborn and no husband. On the 4th morning, as Bethany changed Emma's makeshift diaper, a shadow fell across the doorway. "Hello," a deep voice called. "Anyone in here?" Bethany's heart thundered in her chest. She quickly wrapped Emma in a blanket and tucked her into a drawer lined with her softest petticoat. "Stay quiet, my love," she whispered, before grabbing the small revolver she kept hidden beneath her pillow. "I'm armed," she called, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "State your business." A tall figure filled the doorway, backlit by the morning sun. "Madam, I mean no harm. Name's Henry Thornton. I own the ranch down in the valley. Just checking my property lines when I saw smoke from your chimney." As he stepped into the cabin, Bethany could see him clearly broad-shouldered and weather-worn, with kind blue eyes beneath the brim of his Stetson. He carried a rifle, but it hung loosely at his side, non-threatening. "This isn't your property," Bethany said, the gun still pointed at his chest. "This cabin belonged to Old Man Fredericks." Henry nodded slowly. "Yes, madam, it did. But Fredericks passed last winter, and I bought his claim from the county. Didn't know anyone was living here." His gaze drifted to the makeshift bed, the scattered women's things, and finally to the drawer where Emma chose that moment to let out a tiny, mewling cry. Bethany's face paled. "Please," she whispered, lowering the gun. "We'll be gone by nightfall." To her surprise, concern rather than judgment filled Henry's expression. "You're out here alone? With a baby?" Before she could answer, Emma's cries grew louder. Maternal instinct overrode caution, and Bethany hurried to the drawer, scooping up her daughter and cradling her close. "How old?" Henry asked softly, removing his hat. "For days," Bethany admitted, watching his face carefully for any sign of disgust or disapproval. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "You delivered her yourself?" "Had no choice." Henry moved slowly to the cabin's only chair and sat, as if understanding that his size might be intimidating to the young mother. "I reckon you're running from something or someone. Not my business to pry, but it's going to snow again tonight, and this cabin isn't fit for a mother and newborn." Bethany's chin lifted defiantly. "We'll manage." "No doubt you would," Henry agreed with unexpected gentleness. "But my sister's at the ranch house. She's a widow with 2 little ones of her own. Could use the company, and she knows about babies." Emma's cries grew louder, her tiny face scrunched in hunger. Bethany hesitated, then turned away to open her blouse and nurse her daughter. Henry respectfully averted his eyes. "My offer stands, Mississippi Turner," she supplied after a moment. "Bethany Turner. Miss Turner. My ranch is a half-hour ride from here. You'd have your own room, meals, and safety, in exchange for help around the house when you're able. No strings attached, and you can leave any time." Bethany studied the cowboy's profile, searching for deception. She found only honest concern. "Why would you help us?" Henry's gaze dropped to his worn boots. My mother found herself in a similar situation once. Someone helped her. I'm just passing along the kindness. He stood, placing his hat back on his head. I'll return at midday with a wagon if you decide to accept. If not, I'll bring supplies to see you through the week. After Henry left, Bethany sat in stunned silence, Emma contentedly nursing at her breast. The cowboy's offer seemed too good to be true. Yet the alternative remaining in this drafty cabin with dwindling supplies and winter approaching was hardly a choice at all. By midday, she had packed her few belongings and was waiting when the sound of wagon wheels announced Henry's return. True to his word, Henry's sister Martha greeted them warmly at the ranch house, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and smoking chimney. The widow studied Bethany with kind but shrewd eyes, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "You're safe here," she said simply, taking the tiny bundle from Bethany's arms with practiced ease. "Let me show you to your room while Henry brings in your things." The weeks that followed established a routine that brought unexpected comfort to Bethany's life. Martha proved to be not just an experienced mother, but a friend who asked no questions about Emma's father. Henry maintained a respectful distance, but Bethany often caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. As December brought deeper snow, Bethany's strength returned. She insisted on helping with household chores, cooking alongside Martha, and caring for all three children while Martha tended to the preserving and mending. Henry's nephews, 5-year-old William and 3-year-old James, adored baby Emma and proudly appointed themselves her protectors. One evening, as Bethany sat by the fire darning stockings while Emma slept in a cradle Henry had crafted, the cowboy approached her hesitantly. "Miss Turner, would you mind some company?" She smiled, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling with his answering smile. "You're good with her," he said, nodding toward Emma's cradle. "She's thriving under your care." "She's all I have," Bethany replied simply. Henry studied her for a moment. "If you don't mind my asking, what are your plans? For the future, I mean." The question caught her off guard. In truth, Bethany hadn't thought beyond surviving each day, keeping Emma fed and warm. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Eventually, I'll need to find work somewhere, save enough to start over." "You could stay," Henry said quietly. "Martha loves having you here and the boys. Well, they'd be heartbroken if you left." "And you?" The words slipped out before Bethany could stop them. Henry's gaze met hers, steady and earnest. "I'd miss you both something fierce." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Then Emma stirred, breaking the moment, and Bethany turned her attention to the baby. As winter deepened into January, Bethany noticed subtle changes in her relationship with Henry. He sought her company more frequently, bringing her wildflowers preserved in his mother's botany books or reading aloud from newspapers while she nursed Emma. Sometimes their hands would brush as they passed dishes at dinner, and the contact sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the blazing hearth. On Emma's 1-month birthday, a blizzard howled across the valley, forcing the family to remain indoors. Martha entertained the boys with stories while Bethany prepared a stew for dinner. When Henry entered the kitchen, stomping snow from his boots after checking the livestock in the barn, his cheeks were ruddy with cold. "Smells wonderful in here," he said, hanging his coat by the door. Bethany smiled, stirring the pot. "Just a simple stew. Nothing special. Made by you, that makes it special enough." His voice had dropped to a near whisper, and when she turned, he was standing closer than she expected. "Mr. Thornton, Henry," he corrected gently. "After all this time, I think you might call me Henry." "Henry," she repeated, finding she liked the way his name felt on her tongue. I want to thank you for everything you've done for Emma and me." "No thanks needed." His blue eyes were serious as they held hers. "Having you here, it's brought life back to this house. To me." Before Bethany could respond, Emma's cries echoed from the adjoining room. With an apologetic smile, she hurried to tend to her daughter, heart pounding with emotions she wasn't ready to name. That night, as Bethany placed Emma in her cradle, a soft knock sounded at her bedroom door. She opened it to find Henry holding a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. "A gift," he explained, "for Emma's 1-month birthday." Surprised, Bethany invited him in and carefully unwrapped the package. Inside lay a silver rattle, delicately engraved with tiny flowers. "It was my mother's," Henry said, watching her face. "Then Martha's children used it. I thought Emma might like it too." Emotion tightened Bethany's throat as she held the beautiful heirloom. "This is too precious to give away." Henry's fingers gently covered hers. "Nothing's too precious for her. Or for you." Their eyes met in the lamplight, and Bethany felt something shift between them, a barrier dissolving, a possibility opening. Before she could examine the feeling, Emma fussed in her cradle. Henry stepped back, bidding her good night with a tip of his head. As February's milder weather allowed for outdoor activities, Bethany discovered a new side to Henry. He was patient with his nephews, teaching them to ride their pony and build snow forts. To her surprise, he was equally gentle with Emma, holding her with confident hands when Bethany needed to hang laundry or help Martha with baking. One crisp afternoon, while Martha took the boys to visit neighbors, Henry invited Bethany for a sleigh ride around the property. "Emma's sleeping," Bethany hesitated. "I shouldn't leave her." "Bring her along," Henry suggested. "I've lined the sleigh with warm blankets, and the fresh air might do her good." Wrapped in layers of blankets with Emma secured against her chest, Bethany found herself enjoying the peaceful glide across snow-covered fields. Henry pointed out landmarks: the creek where he'd caught his first fish, the hill where wildflowers would bloom come spring, the distant mountains that marked the boundary of his land. "It's beautiful," Bethany breathed, her words forming clouds in the winter air. Henry's gaze never left her face. "Yes, it is." The sleigh slowed as they approached a stand of pines, sheltered from the wind. Henry helped her down, careful of the precious bundle against her chest. "I wanted to show you something," he explained, leading her to a small clearing where a wooden cross stood, nearly hidden by snow. "My father," he said quietly. "He's been gone 5 years now. Mother followed him last spring." Bethany touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry for your loss. They had 40 years together. A good life." Henry turned to face her, his expression earnest. "My father taught me that when you find something worth holding on to, you don't let fear or pride stand in your way." Emma stirred against Bethany's chest, letting out a tiny cry. Henry smiled, reaching out to adjust the blanket around the baby's face. "May I?" he asked, arms extended. Bethany carefully transferred her daughter to Henry's waiting embrace. The sight of her tiny girl cradled in his strong arms stirred something deep within her, longing for something she'd never dared to imagine. "She has your eyes," Henry murmured, gazing down at Emma. Then, in a moment that would forever change the course of Bethany's life, he bent his head and pressed a gentle kiss to the child's forehead. "You're mine," he whispered to the baby. "If you and your mama would have me, you're both mine to cherish and protect." Tears sprang to Bethany's eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming hope she'd long since abandoned. "Henry, you know Emma isn't. Blood doesn't make a family," he interrupted softly. "Love does. And I love her because she's part of you. And you, Bethany Turner, have claimed a part of my heart I didn't know was missing." The confession hung between them, crystallizing in the winter air. Bethany studied his face, searching for doubt or hesitation and finding none. "You can't know what you're offering," she whispered. "People will talk. They'll judge you for taking in another man's child." Henry's laugh was gentle. "Let them talk. I've lived 30 years in this territory, built this ranch from nothing. I've earned the right to choose my own happiness." His expression sobered. "But I wouldn't presume. That is, your feelings may not." Bethany silenced him by stepping forward, reaching up to touch his cheek. "My feelings run deeper than I've allowed myself to admit." With Emma cradled safely between them, Henry lowered his head and pressed his lips to Bethany's in a kiss that spoke of promises and possibilities. As spring transformed the ranch with new growth, Bethany's life blossomed in ways she never imagined. Henry courted her properly, bringing wildflowers and taking her for Sunday rides, always respectful of her boundaries. Emma grew chubby and strong, adored by everyone in the household. On a warm April evening, as Bethany sat on the porch watching Henry teach the boys to whittle, Martha joined her with a knowing smile. "He's asked for our mother's ring," she revealed, nodding toward her brother. "Been keeping it polished for weeks now." Bethany's cheeks colored. "He hasn't said anything to me." "My brother was always methodical," Martha chuckled. Likes to have everything perfect before he makes his move. Her expression softened. You know, when he brought you and Emma home that day, I saw something in him change. He's always been a good man, but loving you has made him whole. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Henry asked Bethany to walk with him to the garden where early spring flowers were beginning to bloom. I've been thinking, he began, taking her hands in his. A dangerous pastime, she teased, trying to calm her racing heart. His smile was tender as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. Bethany Turner, you came into my life when I wasn't looking, but now I can't imagine a day without seeing your smile or hearing your laugh. You've brought joy back to this ranch and purpose back to my life. Sinking to one knee, he opened the pouch and removed a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. This was my mother's, and her mother's before her. I'd be honored if you would wear it as my wife. Tears blurred Bethany's vision. Henry, are you certain? Emma is my daughter in every way that matters, he said firmly. From the moment I held her, I knew I wanted to be her father. I want to give her my name, and give you both the protection of mine. Yes, Bethany whispered, her heart overflowing. Yes, I will marry you. They were wed in May, beneath an archway of spring blossoms in the garden. Martha stood as Bethany's witness, while Henry's oldest ranch hand served as his best man. Emma, dressed in a christening gown that had belonged to Henry's mother, slept peacefully in Martha's arms throughout the ceremony. I take you, Bethany, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Henry vowed, his voice strong and sure. And I promise to love and cherish both you and Emma, to protect and provide for you, in good times and bad, until death parts us. When Bethany repeated her vows, adding her promise to make a true home with him, there wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Henry sealed their union with a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. At the small reception that followed, Henry asked to hold Emma. With the baby cradled in one arm, he raised a glass with his free hand. To my family, he toasted. My beautiful wife and our perfect daughter. Later, as twilight softened the edges of the day, Henry and Bethany sat on the porch swing, Emma sleeping against her father's chest. His hand gently stroked the baby's back as he gazed at his wife with undisguised adoration. Happy? He asked simply. Bethany leaned her head on his shoulder, contentment warming her from within. More than I ever thought possible. I was thinking, Henry said carefully, that when Emma's a bit older, perhaps we might give her a brother or sister. The blush that colored Bethany's cheeks matched the sunset. I'd like that very much. As the years passed, the Thornton ranch prospered and grew. Emma, with her mother's spirit and her father's steady nature, blossomed into a confident child who never questioned her place in Henry's heart. When she was 3, the family welcomed a son they named James Henry, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Sarah. On Emma's 5th birthday, as the family celebrated with a picnic by the creek, the little girl climbed onto Henry's lap with a serious expression. Papa, she began, her small hands framing his weathered face. Tommy Wilson said you're not my real father. Is that true? Henry's heart clenched, but his voice remained steady. Tommy Wilson doesn't know what makes a real father, he said, holding her gaze. A real father is someone who loves you more than anything, who teaches you and protects you, who holds you when you're scared and cheers when you're brave. Like you do. Emma nodded, satisfied. Like I do. Henry agreed, pulling her close. You became mine the moment I first held you, Emma Thornton. Nothing will ever change that. From her blanket nearby, where she nursed baby Sarah, Bethany watched the exchange with tears in her eyes. Henry caught her gaze over their daughter's dark curls and winked, his love for them both plain in his smile. That night, after the children were asleep, Bethany found Henry on the porch, smoking his evening pipe and gazing at the stars. She slipped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his back. Thank you, she whispered. He turned in her embrace, pipe forgotten. For what? For seeing value in a desperate woman with a newborn. For loving a child born of another man's betrayal. For giving us both a name and a home. Henry cupped her face in his calloused hands. You have it backwards, my love. You and Emma saved me from a half-life of loneliness. You gave me purpose when I was just going through the motions. As they stood together under the vast Montana sky, Bethany reflected on the journey that had brought her here from desperate fear in an abandoned cabin to profound joy in the arms of a man who had chosen to love her and her daughter without reservation. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "what would have happened if you hadn't checked those property lines that day?" Henry's arms tightened around her. "I don't believe in accidents, Bethany. I believe I was meant to find you both." His lips brushed her forehead. "Emma may have been born in secret, but she was always destined to be mine, just as you were always meant to be my wife." In the soft glow of lamplight from the window, Bethany rose on tiptoe to kiss her husband, grateful beyond words for the cowboy who had given her daughter his name and given them both his heart. As the years rolled on, Emma grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's kind heart and her father's steadfast loyalty. Though she eventually learned the truth of her birth, it never shook her conviction that Henry Thornton was her true father in every way that mattered. On her 18th birthday, Henry presented Emma with a leather-bound journal. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "To my beloved daughter, who made me a father before I knew I needed to be one. You have been mine from the moment I kissed your forehead and claimed you as my own. That will never change." The Thornton Ranch remained a haven of love and acceptance, a testament to the family forged not by blood but by choice, all because a cowboy had the courage to kiss a newborn's forehead and whisper, "You're mine."